My son Marcus looked at his lawyer and then at me. He said, "She's 70 and confused. Just have her sign the papers." He thought I couldn't hear him. He thought I was just a frail old woman too simple to understand the documents they put in front of him. He thought the $1.5 million my husband left me was already his. He didn't know I had already read the fine print. He didn't know I had already called my lawyer. And he certainly didn't know that the pen I was holding wasn't just for signing. It was a recorder. Before I continue this story, please tell me where you are watching from in the comments. And be sure to subscribe if you believe that wisdom, not age, is what truly matters. The kitchen was warm. That was the first thing I noticed every morning. A small, cozy warmth that had nothing to do with the old radiator and everything to do with the rising sun hitting the yellow wallpaper. At 70 years old, my life was measured in simple comforts. The hiss of the coffee pot, the weight of my favorite quilt, and the smell of cinnamon and nutmeg. I pressed the fork into the edge of the pie crust, making the little ridges just right. Sweet potato pie wasn't just food, it was a message. It said, "I see you. I care about you." And today the folks at the community center needed to hear that message. My hands, spotted with age but still steady, worked the dough. These hands had done a lot. They'd raised my son Marcus. They'd held my husband Samuel until his last breath 3 years ago. Now they mostly baked. My pension from 30 years as a school secretary covered the bills for this little house. It wasn't much, but it was enough. It was a quiet life, a simple life. The center was my main focus these days. Ever since I retired, I'd gone down there 3 times a week. It was just a small building over on MLK Boulevard, but it was the heart of our neighborhood. We ran a food pantry, an after-school program, and a seniors brunch. Today was the brunch. My sweet potato pies were famous. Samuel always said I could have sold them, made a fortune. But I always laughed. "Who wants the trouble of running a business?" I'd tell him. "This way, I get to see the smiles for free." I slid the first 2 pies into the preheated oven. The timer clicked reassuringly. My son Marcus said I was wasting my time. "Mom, why are you spending your days baking for strangers?" he'd asked last Sunday. He and his wife Tasha had stopped by. They lived across town in that new gated community. Their house was all white carpets and glass tables, not warm like this. Tasha especially never understood. "You should be relaxing, Mom," she'd said, looking at my flour-dusted apron like it was something contagious. "Traveling, enjoying your retirement, not running a soup kitchen." But they didn't understand. This was my joy. This little house, this kitchen, the neighbors who waved when I checked the mail. I glanced at the clock. 9 a.m. I had just enough time to let them cool before I walked them down to the center. I pulled my old red coat from the hook. It was worn at the cuffs, but it was warm. I wasn't an empire builder. I wasn't a traveler. I was just Mama Jo, the neighborhood grandma. Harmless. That's what they all thought. That's what Marcus and Tasha thought. And honestly, that's exactly what I wanted them to believe. Because when people think you're harmless, they get careless. And my son had been getting very, very careless. The oven timer chimed a sharp little bell cutting through the quiet of my kitchen. I had just set the pies on the cooling rack, the smell of cinnamon and baked sweet potato filling the air, when the front door opened with a familiar creak. "Grandma, you in here making the whole neighborhood hungry." My heart did a little skip. That voice. It was the only medicine in the world that ever truly worked. "In the kitchen, baby." Sasangaki niti dio. Elijah appeared, ducking his head as he came through the doorframe, just like his grandfather Samuel used to do. At 18, he was all long limbs and bright eyes, carrying a heavy backpack and a heavier course load at the university. He dropped the bag by the door and came straight to me, wrapping me in a hug that felt like home. "It smells perfect, Mama Jo," he said, pulling back to look at me. "Pies for the center brunch." Of course, Mrs. Gabley specifically requested one. "You want a slice before you head out? You even have to ask." He was already grabbing a plate. Unlike his parents, Elijah never looked at my baking as a waste of time. He saw it for what it was, love. He set his laptop bag on the kitchen table and pulled out a thick spiral-bound folder. "I do need you to look at this before I go, Grandma. The quarterly reports for JW Capital came in." I sighed a long, dramatic sound as I turned back to wipe the counter. Oh, Elijah, honey, don't you start on me with those numbers. You know all those charts and percentages just fly right over my old head. That's why I have you. Elijah opened the folder anyway, his young face serious. Grandma, the dividends from the new real estate trust are up 12%. We need to decide where to allocate the surplus. If we reinvest it... I cut him off, waving my flour-dusted hand. Allocate, honey. You just allocate it right where you think is best. Is there enough in there to fix that leaking roof at the center? He blinked, frustrated, in the gentle way he always was when I did this. Yes, Grandma. There's enough to buy the center a whole new building. This is serious money we're talking about. Well, all money is serious, baby. I finished boxing up one of the pies and pushed it toward him. What's important is what we do with it. Now you make sure the center's roof is handled, and you put the rest wherever you think your Grandpa Samuel would have wanted. The rest of it just gives me a headache. He looked from the complex financial report to my simple, smiling face. He knew he was being dismissed. He sighed, closing the folder. Okay, Mama Joe, I'll handle the allocation, but you really should read the summary I wrote for you. I will, baby. I promise. I lied, patting his cheek. He kissed my forehead, grabbing the pie. Love you, Grandma. I'll see you Sunday for dinner. I'll make your favorite, pot roast. Love you more. I watched him walk down the path, the heavy folder of my business safe in his backpack. He was a good boy, the only one in the family who truly saw me, and the only one I trusted to know the truth. I was just wrapping the aluminum foil over the second pie when my phone buzzed on the counter. I wiped my hands on my apron, the floral one Tasha always said looked so dated, and looked at the screen. Marcus. A smile bloomed on my face. First Elijah, now Marcus. It was a good day. Hey, baby, I answered. You just missed your nephew. He already stole a pie. There was a pause on the other end, just static. Marcus, you there? Yeah, Mom, I'm here. My smile faded. Something was wrong. His voice was thin, tight. This wasn't my confident, successful son. This was the voice of the 12-year-old boy who'd broken Mrs. Gabley's window and was trying to figure out how to tell me. What is it, Marcus? Are you okay? Is Tasha? Is everyone healthy? What? Oh, yeah, everyone's fine. Mom, fine. I was just calling because, well... He took a deep breath. Are you busy Friday night? This was strange. Marcus and Tasha's Friday nights were for expensive restaurants and networking events, not for 70-year-old mothers in floral aprons. I don't have plans, honey. Why? Well, Tasha's boss, Amber Livingston. Tasha talks about her. She's a big deal. Anyway, she's hosting this dinner party at her house. It's really exclusive, Mom. The guest list is important. He was stammering, struggling to get the words out. My mind raced. Was he sick? Did he lose his job? And, Tasha, she wanted me to call and invite you. She specifically asked if you would come with us. I sat down hard in my kitchen chair. I must have misheard him. Tasha, you're Tasha. Yeah, Mom. He sounded like he was trying to convince himself as much as me. She said it's time we started doing more things. You know, as a real family. Her words. A wave of warmth washed over me, so sudden and strong it almost made me dizzy. Tasha, the daughter-in-law who thought my baking was a waste of time, who looked at my little house with pity. She wanted me at an exclusive dinner party with her important boss. Maybe she was finally thawing. Maybe after all these years she was finally ready to see me as part of her life. My heart ached with a hope I hadn't realized I was holding. Oh, Marcus, I said, my voice thick. That's wonderful. Of course I'll come. You tell Tasha thank you for thinking of me. Great, Mom. Great. The relief in his voice was immediate, almost desperate. So, it's Friday at 7. And Mom, it's really fancy. So, I understand, baby. I chuckled already, picturing the navy blue dress I hadn't worn since Samuel's funeral. I'll dust off my pearls, don't you worry. Okay, good, I gotta go. I'll see you Friday. He hung up before I could say I love you. I sat there in the quiet kitchen, the smell of sweet potato pie all around me. I was happy, truly happy. Tasha was finally coming around. But as I picked up the pies for the center, I couldn't shake a little feeling of unease. Why did my son sound less like he was inviting me to a party, and more like he was walking into a trap? I hadn't even finished wrapping the aluminum foil over the second pie when my phone buzzed again. Marcus. My smile faded. 2 calls in 10 minutes. That wasn't like him. Marcus, did you forget to tell me the address? No, Mom, I just... He sighed. That same nervous, thin sound. I was just thinking about Friday night. Tasha and we really want this to go well. You know Amber's house is, well, it's something else. I'm sure it is, baby. I'm looking forward to it. Yeah. So, I was thinking, could you wear that navy blue dress? The one we bought you last Easter? My hand holding the foil paused. My navy dress. Of course. It's a lovely dress. Great. It just looks, professional. I was going to a dinner party, not a job interview, but I let it slide. Whatever you think is best, honey. And Mom, one other thing. He took a deep breath like he was about to jump into cold water. When we're at the party, maybe it's better if you don't talk too much about the community center. The warmth I'd felt just minutes ago vanished. It didn't just fade, it was sucked out of me, leaving an icy cold hollow in my chest. What did you say, Marcus? It's just, these are business people, Mom. Big business. They talk about investments, about the market, about, big things. They won't really understand. Understand what? My voice was quiet. The whole baking pies thing, the food pantry, it's charity work, Mom. It's nice, but it's not what these people talk about. He was rushing his words now, desperate to get them out. We really need you to act normal. Just fit in. Normal. He wanted me to act normal. He wanted me to hide who I was. He wanted me to sit there and pretend that the work I loved, the work that defined me, was something to be ashamed of. I looked around my yellow kitchen, the kitchen he grew up in, the kitchen where I'd baked his birthday cakes and kissed his scraped knees, the kitchen that smelled like love and cinnamon. And my son, my only son, was telling me that this life, my life, was an embarrassment. He wasn't inviting me because Tasha had a change of heart. He was inviting me, but he was asking me to leave Mama Jo at home. He wanted Josephine, the quiet, professional, invisible old woman in the navy blue dress. The silence stretched. Mom, you still there? Are you mad? I picked up the pies, my hands perfectly steady. The anger was so cold and so deep it felt like strength. No, Marcus, I said. My voice was smooth calm. I didn't even recognize it. I'm not mad at all. Oh, good, because Tasha is really... I understand perfectly. I cut him off. You're worried I'll embarrass you in front of your wife's important friends. Don't you worry your head about it. I will be normal. I hung up before he could say another word. I stood there for a long time. They thought I was just a simple old woman. They thought I baked pies because I had nothing better to do. They thought they could buy my silence with an invitation to a fancy dinner party. They had no idea who I was, and they had no idea what they had just started. The taxi turned off the main road onto a winding street I had never known existed. This wasn't a neighborhood. It was a collection of estates. We pulled up to a set of massive wrought iron gates. A man in a crisp uniform stepped out of a small guardhouse, a clipboard in his hand. Name, he asked, his eyes scanning the modest yellow taxi. Josephine Washington, I said through the open window. He frowned, looking down at his list, then back at me. He was clearly confused. A 70-year-old black woman in a simple coat arriving in a taxi didn't match the name on his list. But he found it. The gates swung open silently. The driveway was longer than my entire street. It curved through trees that were lit from below, making them look like sculptures. And then I saw the house. It wasn't a house. It was a statement, all glass and white stone and sharp angles glowing against the dark sky. It looked beautiful, but it didn't look warm. I paid the driver, adding a generous tip. He looked as relieved to be leaving as I was nervous to be arriving. I stood on the front steps, smoothing down the front of my navy blue dress. The wool crepe was high quality. It was the nicest dress I owned, the one Marcus had insisted I wear. I had on my good black shoes, the ones with the sensible 1-inch heel. My feet hurt if I wore anything higher. I felt neat. I felt tidy. But standing in front of this glass palace, I felt like a sparrow trying to blend in with peacocks. Before I could even find the doorbell, the massive front door swung open. Tasha stood there. She was framed in the light, and she looked like she had stepped out of a fashion magazine. She wore a sparkling silver dress that seemed to be made of liquid metal, her hair piled perfectly on her head. Her smile was wide, bright, and stretched so tight I thought it might snap. "Mom, you made it." Her voice was an octave higher than usual. She rushed forward and kissed the air right next to my cheek. Her perfume was heavy and expensive. She grabbed my old red coat. "Let me take this for you." She looked me up and down, just a quick, sharp glance, the navy dress, the sensible shoes. Her smile didn't just freeze, it cracked, just for a split second. Marcus was right behind her, fidgeting with his tie. "Hey, Mom, glad you could come." He gave me a quick, tense hug. Tasha had already turned away, handing my worn coat to a young woman in a black uniform who took it as if it might stain her white gloves. Tasha looped her arm through Marcus's, pulling him back a few steps toward the archway of the main room, where I could hear the murmur of at least 30 people. She leaned into his ear, her voice dropping to a harsh whisper. But the foyer was all marble and glass. Sound carried. "Marcus, I told you to make sure she wore something decent." My God, she looks like the hired help. The hired help. I stood perfectly still. I looked down at my navy blue dress, the dress they bought me, the dress he specifically asked me to wear. I smiled, a simple, pleasant, harmless smile, the kind of smile the help is supposed to have. Tasha turned back to me, her bright, fake smile snapping right back into place. "Come in, Mom. You must be thirsty. Let me get you some champagne. Amber is just dying to meet you." She had no idea I'd heard. She and Marcus walked ahead of me, Tasha already waving at someone across the room. They thought I was old. They thought I was simple. And apparently they thought I was deaf. I followed them into the lion's den, my sensible shoes making no sound at all on their polished marble floor. I let Tasha's words, the hired help, settle in the cold marble foyer. I let them hang there unheard by anyone but me. Then I smiled at her. It was the simple, warm smile I reserved for the children at the community center, the one that asked for nothing in return. "Champagne sounds lovely, dear," I said, my voice soft. "But you know my doctor prefers I stick to water these days. Don't you worry about me. I can find the bar myself." Tasha looked instantly relieved, as if I'd just saved her the chore of being seen with me. "Oh, of course, Mom. It's just past the staircase. Mingle, have fun." She immediately turned back to Marcus, her duty done. I made my way into the main room. It was packed. The sound of high, brittle laughter and the clinking of glasses filled the air. These people were all sharp edges, expensive perfumes, and quick scanning eyes. I found the bar managed by 2 young men in crisp white jackets. "Just a glass of water, please," I said. "No ice." The bartender handed it to me, his eyes already moving to the man in the designer suit waiting behind me. I took my water and found a quiet corner near a massive, floor-to-ceiling window that overlooked a dramatically lit garden. Every bush was perfectly trimmed. Every flower was an exotic blood-red orchid that looked like it would break if you touched it. It was a beautiful prison of a garden. It made me miss my own messy, chaotic yard full of marigolds and stubborn weeds. It's almost too perfect, isn't it? Like it's afraid to get its hands dirty. I turned. A man had stepped up beside me holding a glass of dark amber liquid. He was in his 60s with silver hair and kind, tired eyes. His suit was expensive, I could tell, but it looked lived-in comfortable. He wasn't performing like the others. He was just standing. "That's a good way to put it," I said. "I prefer a garden that has a few weeds. Lets you know it's alive." He let out a real warm chuckle. My thoughts exactly. He held out his hand. Arthur Davenport. I shook it. His grip was firm. Josephine Washington, it's a pleasure. Davenport, I said, the name clicking. You must be Tasha's boss. I am, and please call me Arthur. He took a sip of his drink, his eyes still on the garden. So you're a gardener, Josephine. I remembered Marcus's warning. Don't talk about the center. Don't talk about baking. I grow a few things, I said simply. Mostly vegetables. I find it practical. A practical woman, I admire that. He turned his gaze from the window to me. It was direct, respectful. Tasha mentioned you do a lot of volunteer work. I help out at my local community center, I said, deciding I wouldn't be ashamed. We run a food pantry and some after-school programs. That, he said, his voice lowering, is truly important work, far more important than what most of us in this room do. He gestured to the crowd. We just move money around. You feed people. I was stunned by his sincerity. I just bake a few pies, Arthur. It's nothing grand. My mother used to say that baking a pie was an act of hope, he said softly. It's not nothing. It's authentic. He looked at me, really looked at me, not at my navy dress or my sensible shoes. I have to say Josephine Tasha has mentioned you, but you are not at all what I expected. Oh, and what did you expect? He smiled a genuine, almost apologetic smile. Frankly, given Tasha's intensity, I expected someone a bit more like her. You, on the other hand, seem refreshingly real. Before I could answer, Tasha's high, sharp voice cut through the air. Mom, there you are. I've been looking everywhere. Come, Amber is just dying to meet you. She was bearing down on us, her silver dress glittering. Her smile was tight. She did not look happy that the hired help was talking to the most important man in the room. Tasha's high, sharp voice cut through the air. Mom, there you are. I've been looking everywhere. She was bearing down on us, her silver dress glittering, her smile a rictus of panic. She didn't just walk over. She marched, grabbing Marcus by the cuff of his suit jacket and dragging him along with her. He stumbled slightly, looking like a man being led to his own execution. His face was pale. Arthur Davenport turned his kind, calm expression unchanged. Tasha, Marcus, I was just having a lovely conversation with your mother. Tasha let out a high-pitched, tinkling laugh that sounded like a tiny alarm bell. Oh, Mr. Davenport, you are just too kind. You'll talk to anyone. She practically shoved Marcus forward. We are just so sorry. I truly hope she hasn't been bothering you. There it was. The apology. Not sorry to interrupt, but sorry she bothered you. I stood there, my glass of water held steady in my hand. I didn't say a word. I just watched. Arthur looked genuinely confused. Bothering me? Not in the slightest. Josephine was just telling me about her work at the community center. It's fascinating. Tasha's face went from pale to ghostly white. I could almost hear her thoughts. The community center, the baking, the food pantry. She looked horrified. She turned to me, her eyes flashing with a fury that was almost impressive. Mom, she hissed, her voice low but sharp enough for both men to hear. What did I tell you in the car? Marcus finally spoke, his voice weak, desperate. Tasha, honey, maybe this isn't the time. Tasha ignored him. She turned back to Arthur, her smile so bright and brittle I thought her face would shatter. Mr. Davenport, I am so sorry. My mother-in-law, she gets a little confused sometimes. She tapped her own temple, a delicate, insulting little gesture. She doesn't always understand, professional boundaries. She probably thinks this is one of her little church socials. Confused. First, I was the hired help. Now, I was senile. I set my water glass down on a passing tray. I was done being the quiet, harmless old woman in the corner. Confused, Tasha? I asked. My voice was calm, but it cut through her high-pitched panic like a knife. I thought I understood things perfectly. I was just explaining to Mr. Davenport how our center's Raise the Roof Fund is going. You remember, don't you? The one you and Marcus said was a nice little hobby? Tasha's face flushed a deep, ugly red. Arthur Davenport looked between us. The kindness in his eyes was replaced by a sharp, intelligent curiosity. He was a businessman, after all. He knew a power play when he saw one. "Actually, Tasha," Arthur said, his voice smooth as silk, "I found it fascinating. Josephine's fundraising model for that little hobby is more efficient than most of the nonprofits my foundation partners with. I was just about to ask her if she'd be willing to sit down with my board." Tasha's mouth opened, and for the first time that night, no sound came out at all. She looked at me, really looked at me, as if seeing me for the first time. Not as the confused help, but as a threat. Amber's face, which had gone ghostly white, now flooded with a hot, blotchy red. Arthur Davenport's validation of me wasn't just an embarrassment. It was a threat. It was a complete reversal of the power she thought she held. She looked at Marcus, her eyes narrowed to slits. "Marcus, take your mother home, now." "Amber, honey," Marcus whispered, touching her arm, his eyes pleading. "Calm down. Mr. Davenport was just being polite." "Don't tell me to calm down," she hissed, pulling her arm away. She turned back to me, her expensive veneer completely gone, replaced by pure ugly rage. You need to leave. You've bothered Mr. Davenport enough." I looked at her, then I looked at Arthur. "Arthur, it was a pleasure meeting you," I said, my voice perfectly steady. "Perhaps we can continue this conversation about the community center at a later date." "I would like that very much, Josephine," Arthur said pointedly, ignoring Amber and giving her his back. This dismissal, this final polite exclusion from the man she was trying to impress, was the final push. Amber lost all control. She spun around, her voice shaking, scanning the room, until her eyes landed on the uniformed security guard standing near the grand entrance. "Security, over here now!" The entire party, which had been a low, pleasant murmur of conversation, went silent. Every head turned. The clinking of glasses stopped. The guard, a large man in a sharp black suit, looked confused, but began to walk over immediately. "Is there a problem, Mrs. Hayes?" Amber raised her arm and pointed a finger glittering with rings directly at me. At me. "This woman," she said, her voice ringing out sharp and venomous in the cavernous, silent room. This beggar is harassing our guests. She needs to leave." A collective gasp went through the room. A beggar. Marcus looked like he had been turned to stone. His face was a sickly shade of gray. He just stood there, paralyzed, his mouth slightly open. Arthur Davenport looked absolutely appalled. He took a step forward, his face dark with anger. "Amber, that is entirely uncalled for. This woman is Josephine Washington, she is." But Amber was too far gone. She was shrieking now, all traces of the sophisticated hostess gone. "I want her out. She snuck in here and started bothering everyone. She's probably stealing the silverware. Get her out of my sight." The guard stopped, looking utterly bewildered, stuck between the hysterical hostess and the dignified, calm old woman who was clearly a guest. I looked at Amber's twisted face. I looked at my son Marcus, who was staring at the floor, refusing to meet my eyes. He was letting this happen. He was letting his wife call his mother a beggar in front of the most important people in his life. I didn't need to be thrown out. I straightened my back. I looked at Arthur Davenport and gave him one small, dignified nod. "Thank you." Then I turned, and without a single word, I began to walk toward the door. I walked past the shocked faces. I walked past the silent, staring guests. I walked past my frozen son. The security guard, to his credit, rushed to open the massive door for me. As I stepped out into the cold night air, leaving the warmth and the light and the cruelty behind, I heard Marcus finally find his voice. A weak, broken sound. "Amber, what did you just do?" I didn't wait to hear her answer. I was already walking down that long, dark driveway, my sensible shoes clicking on the stone. I never looked back. The taxi ride home was silent. The driver, a kind-faced man, tried to make small talk about the weather, about the traffic. I just nodded, staring out the window, seeing nothing but the reflection of my own face superimposed over the passing streetlights. "A beggar. Get her out of my sight!" Tasha's voice was a high-pitched scream in my memory. But it wasn't her voice that hurt the most. It was the silence, the crushing, absolute silence from my son. The cab pulled up to my little house on the quiet street. The porch light was on just as I'd left it. It looked so small, so simple, so warm. I paid the driver, my hands trembling slightly as I fumbled with the cash. I walked up the path, unlocked my door, and stepped inside. The house was quiet. It smelled like cinnamon and apples from the pie I had left on the counter. It smelled like home. I closed the door, turned the deadbolt. The click echoed in the stillness, and then it hit me. I slid down the length of the door until I was sitting on the worn welcome mat. I didn't make a sound. I just sat there in the dark hallway as the full weight of the humiliation washed over me. She looks like the hired help. She's confused. A beggar. Tasha's words were cruel. They were designed to cut, to diminish, to remove me like a piece of trash. But Tasha was just a mean, ambitious woman. I expected nothing less from her. The real pain, the one that felt like a physical knife twisting in my chest, was Marcus. He had stood there. He stood there while his wife told her boss I was senile. He stood there while she screamed for security to throw me out. He stood there while she called the mother who raised him, the mother who had sat up with him through fevers and held him when his heart was broken, a beggar. He didn't say a word. He didn't move. He didn't even look at me. He just let it happen. My boy, my Marcus, the son I had poured my entire life into after Samuel died. The man I thought was good and kind and strong. He was a coward. He was a weak, hollow man who had chosen his wife's anger and her boss's good opinion over his own mother's dignity. The tears came then. Not the quiet, dignified tears of an old woman. They were hot, scalding tears that ripped their way up from a place I thought had died with Samuel. I put my head in my hands and I cried. I cried for the humiliation. I cried for the rage. But mostly I cried because in that silent, marble-floored ballroom, I hadn't just been insulted by my daughter-in-law. I had watched my son disappear. The Marcus I knew, the son I loved, was gone, and this new, weak stranger had taken his place. I don't know how long I sat there in the dark. An hour, maybe 2. The tears had dried on my face, leaving my skin feeling tight and old. I hadn't even taken off my navy blue dress. I heard a key in the lock. My heart leaped for a second. Had Marcus come to apologize? The door opened. "Grandma, why are all the lights off?" It was Elijah. He flipped on the kitchen switch and stopped his backpack halfway to the floor. He saw me still in my party dress, sitting at the table in the shadows, my face stained with tears. "Grandma?" He dropped his bag and was kneeling by my chair in an instant. His hand, so young and strong, covered mine. "What happened? You left. I tried to find you, but Dad said you'd gotten a taxi. What did they do to you after I left?" His voice was fierce. He wasn't a child anymore. He was a man, and he was angry on my behalf. It's just... Yes, I couldn't get the words out. Before I could, the phone on the wall, the old landline, rang. The sound was violent, an explosion in the quiet kitchen. We both jumped. The caller ID showed Marcus's name. Elijah's eyes narrowed. "Don't answer it, Grandma. Don't." "No," I said, my voice hoarse. "I need to hear this." I picked up the receiver. My hand was shaking. "Hello, Marcus." There was a half-second of silence. Then his voice, not soft, not sorry, but cold and sharp like broken glass. "Mom, what the hell did you do?" I couldn't breathe. What did I do?" "You embarrassed us. You embarrassed Amber. Do you have any idea what you've done?" His voice was rising, vibrating with rage. "Amber is upstairs crying. She's been crying for an hour. She has been working for months to get in good with Davenport. She invites you, her mother-in-law, to the biggest night of her career, and how do you repay her? You make a scene, you harass her boss, and then you just walk out like you're insulted." I was speechless. The world tilted. "Marcus," I finally managed. She called me a beggar. She screamed for security to throw me out." "Because you were harassing him. You were probably telling him some sob story about your little community center. You always do this, Mom. You always make it about you." Elijah, who was listening to every word, looked sick. He tried to take the phone from me. I held on. "Amber is mortified," Marcus yelled. "Davenport left right after you did. He looked disgusted. You just ruined everything. Her career is probably over, all because you couldn't act normal for one night." The betrayal was complete. It wasn't just that he had stood by and done nothing. It was that he had seen the entire event, seen his wife's monstrous behavior, and had twisted it in his mind until I was the one to blame. I looked at the phone, at this stranger screaming at me, "Mom, you owe Amber an apology. You hear me? You need to call her and apologize." I took a breath, and all the pain, all the tears, they just vanished, replaced by something cold and hard and clear. I hung up the phone. Elijah stared at me. "Grandma?" "It's done," I said. I stood up and my back was straight. "That was the last time." I hung up the phone. The click of the receiver settling into its cradle was the only sound in the small, warm kitchen. Elijah was staring at me, his face pale, his hands clenched into fists on his knees. "He blamed you," he whispered. It wasn't a question. It was a statement of disbelief. "After that, he called you, and he blamed you." "It's done, Elijah," I said. My voice was tired, empty. The anger from the phone call had burned out, leaving nothing but ash. "No," he said. He stood up. He wasn't the boy who had come in for pie. He was someone else, someone I hadn't seen before. He was Samuel's grandson. "No, it's not done." He walked over to the kitchen table where his laptop bag still sat by the chair. He unzipped it and pulled out the thick folder, the one with the JW Capital reports. He opened it right there on my counter, next to the cooling pies. "Grandma," he said, his voice quiet now, but with an edge that was sharper than any knife. "I need you to confirm something for me. No more headaches. I need you to be the CEO for 5 minutes." I looked at him, startled by his tone. "Amber," he said, "the woman who called you a beggar. Her company. It's Aura Marketing, right? That's where she's a senior executive." I had to think for a moment to pull the name from the fog of the party. "Yes," I said. "Aura Marketing. I remember Marcus being so proud of her when she got the job." Elijah nodded slowly, his eyes scanning a spreadsheet in the folder. He didn't look angry anymore. He looked focused. "I thought that name sounded familiar," he said, tapping the paper with his finger. "I was reviewing the acquisitions portfolio this morning." He looked up at me. "Grandma, JW Capital acquired a 60% majority stake in Aura Marketing 6 months ago. It's part of our new media ventures portfolio." I just looked at him. I had signed those papers. I remembered the meeting. A small, struggling marketing firm. It had been a good investment. "She doesn't know," I said. It was a whisper. "She doesn't know what JW Capital is." A strange, cold smile touched my lips. "She has no idea who JW is. She just thinks she married into a family with a simple old woman." Elijah's smile matched mine. It was not a kind smile. It was Samuel's smile. The one he got right before he'd won a negotiation. "Oh," he said softly. "Well, I guess she's about to find out." He pulled his laptop from his bag and set it on the kitchen table. He sat down, opened it, and the screen lit up his face. "She's about to find out," he said, his fingers already flying across the keyboard, "what happens when you try to fire the owner." I poured Elijah a glass of water, my hand perfectly steady. The shock had passed, replaced by a cold, quiet anger I hadn't felt in years. It was the same anger that had fueled me when I started my first business, a small catering company after Samuel died, working 18-hour days to build something from nothing. Tasha had called me confused. She had called me a beggar. She thought I was a simple old woman. I sat down across from my grandson. The kitchen light gleamed off the screen of his laptop. "What are you doing, Elijah?" "Just accessing the network," he said, his voice casual, as if he were checking his email. "When you put me on the board of JW Capital as your proxy, you gave me full administrative access." JW Capital, I said, tasting the name. Josephine Washington, my name. The company I had built from that first catering business. The one that now owned hotels, media firms, and apparently a little marketing company called Aura. Tasha? Amber? She has no idea, I murmured. Of course she doesn't, Elijah said, not looking up. To her, you're just Mom, the old lady with the baking hobby. She never once thought to ask how you paid for my dad's house, or how you funded my entire college education. She just saw the floral apron and stopped looking. His fingers moved in a blur. Lines of code scrolled past on a black window. He wasn't just my 18-year-old nephew. I knew he was brilliant, a computer science major who built servers in his dorm room for fun. But I had never seen this side of him, the focused, dangerous side. This wasn't just a smart kid. This was a hacker. My hacker. She called you a beggar, he said, his voice flat and hard. In front of her boss, in front of your employee. She didn't know, I said. She's about to. He clicked a few keys and a new window opened. It was a corporate email inbox. At the top it read, Amber Hayes, Senior Vice President, Aura Marketing. You're in her email, I whispered, stunned. Full admin access, Grandma. I can read every email she's ever sent or received on the company server. I can see her direct messages on the company chat. I can see her calendar. I can see everything. He started typing, his eyes scanning, processing information at a speed I couldn't follow. Let's see what our senior vice president has been up to, he muttered. Okay. Complains about her assistant. Complains about the coffee. Complains about you. He stopped, his face tightening. He clicked, and an email thread opened. It was between Amber and Marcus, from 3 days ago. I just sent the invite, Marcus had written. She's coming. Are you sure this is going to work, Amber? Amber's reply was instant. Of course it's going to work. She's a sentimental old fool. She'll be so thrilled I invited her. She'll sign anything I put in front of her once she's had a few glasses of champagne. Stop worrying. By Saturday, she'll have signed over conservatorship and will finally have access to her money. It's time she finally paid her dues. I felt the blood drain from my face. It wasn't just humiliation. It was a plan. A plan. They had brought me to that party to get me drunk and have me sign papers, to steal my company, to steal everything. I sat there frozen in my own kitchen. The smell of sweet potato pie suddenly seemed sickly, like a funeral flower. Conservatorship. That was the word on the screen. It wasn't just an invitation. It wasn't just humiliation. It was a cold, calculated plan to have me declared incompetent, to take everything I had built, everything Samuel and I had saved, and put it in their hands. He knew, I whispered. I was looking at my son's words. Are you sure this is going to work? He wasn't just weak. He wasn't just a coward who stood by while his wife insulted me. He was a conspirator. Elijah's face was grim. He clicked the mouse, his movements sharp and angry. There's more, Grandma. More. I didn't think there could be more. This, he said. He opened a different email thread. The subject line was the Hillcrest property. Hillcrest, I asked, my voice numb. What is that? It's where Arthur Davenport lives, Elijah said, his voice flat. I recognize the street name from the files. It's the most expensive, exclusive zip code in the state. The first email in the thread was from Amber to Marcus, sent 2 months ago. It was a link to a real estate listing, a massive, cold-looking glass house even bigger than Davenport's. I saw Marcus's reply. Amber, this is insane. It's listed for $8 million. We don't have $8 million. Amber's reply, sent 1 minute later, made my blood run cold. Not yet, we don't. But we will. This is where people like Davenport live, Marcus. This is where the real players are. You don't get respect by living in a tacky suburb. You get it by living next door to the boss. Where are we getting that kind of money, Amber? My mother would never just give it to us. And then Amber's final reply. We aren't going to ask her, baby. We're going to take it. Your mother is sitting on a gold mine. That little JW Capital thing is worth a fortune. She's too old and simple to manage it anyway. It's time for her to retire, properly. The conservatorship plan is the fastest, cleanest way. We prove she's confused, which she is, and the court gives us control. We buy the house in Hillcrest. We finally get the life we deserve. We just have to get that sentimental old woman out of the way. That old woman. They weren't just trying to steal from me, they were trying to erase me. They wanted to take my life's work, the company I had built in my husband's memory, to buy a house. To impress a man who tonight Amber had completely humiliated herself in front of. I looked at Elijah. He was just watching me. They wanted to impress him, I said. The absurdity of it was staggering. They wanted to steal your money to buy a house in his neighborhood. Elijah clarified, his voice hard. So they could pretend to be something they're not, and they were going to lock you away to do it. He turned back to the laptop. She called you a beggar. He typed something. Let's see what happens when the beggar closes the bank. I just sat there, my hands flat on the worn wood of my kitchen table. I couldn't feel them. I couldn't feel anything except a cold, hollow space where my heart used to be. Conservatorship. They were going to have me declared incompetent. My son, my Marcus, he was going to sit at a table in a courtroom and tell a judge that his mother was confused. Elijah's voice pulled me back. It was hard like a piece of flint. She's sloppy, Grandma. She's so arrogant she didn't even bother to use her personal phone. I looked up. He was still working his fingers a blur across the keys. What do you mean? I'm in her system-level browser history, he said. He sounded disgusted. The company servers log every keystroke, every search query. She's a senior VP. She should have known that, but she thought she was untouchable. He scrolled down a long, long list, past searches for designer shoes and vacation spots. She's been busy, he muttered. Look at this. 3 months ago. He turned the laptop screen toward me. I had to squint to read the small text. It was a search query from Amber's computer. Quick home appraisal, 2224 Willow Street. That's your address, Grandma? Elijah said, his voice dangerously quiet. She was pricing your house, figuring out what you were worth to her. I felt sick. She was going to sell my house. Worse. He scrolled down further. Here, 2 weeks later, after she got the appraisal value, he highlighted another line of text. I read the words, but my brain couldn't seem to make them make sense. How to take out a loan against a house in a trust. She wasn't going to wait for you to die, Grandma, Elijah said. She was going to leverage your home, steal the equity right out from under you, and then, here. He stopped scrolling. His whole body went still. Oh no, he whispered. What, Elijah? What is it? What could be worse? He didn't say anything. He just highlighted the last 3 searches, from 2 days ago, the day before Marcus called me to invite me to the party. How to declare a senior mentally incompetent, lawyers specializing in emergency conservatorship, what happens to assets when senior is declared incompetent. I put my hand over my mouth. The pies, the party, the navy blue dress. It was all a stage. It was a performance. They were going to get me there in a room full of important witnesses, her boss, and they were going to get me to sign papers. Or if I refused, they would use my confusion as proof. They weren't just going to steal from me. They were going to erase me. They were going to lock me away, take my name, my dignity, my home, and the company I had built from nothing. This wasn't a robbery. It was an execution. I looked at my grandson. His face was a mask of cold fury. Elijah, I whispered. What? What are you going to do? He looked up from the screen, and his eyes were not the eyes of my 18-year-old nephew. They were the eyes of his grandfather. She wanted to know the value of your assets, Grandma, he said. I think it's time she finally found out. I didn't have to wait long. I was in my kitchen the next morning, but I wasn't baking. I was drinking black coffee and staring out the window at my garden, my messy, beautiful garden. A car door slammed outside. It slammed so hard it rattled the windows in their frames. I heard footsteps. Not walking. Stomping. They stomped up my concrete path and onto the porch. The knock wasn't a knock. It was a pounding. 3 hard, angry thuds that shook the door. I took a slow sip of my coffee. I set the mug down gently. I walked to the front door, my old slippers silent on the floorboards. I turned the deadbolt and opened it. They were both there. Marcus and Amber. They looked awful. Amber's eyes were swollen and red, her face puffy from crying. Her expensive hair was a mess. Marcus just looked gray. His suit from last night was rumpled. His tie was loose, and he looked like he hadn't slept in a week. "We need to talk," Marcus said. His voice was a low growl. He tried to step past me. I didn't move. I stood in the doorway, my small, 70-year-old body blocking the entrance. "Did you?" I asked. "Mom, don't do this. Let us in." "You are not welcome in this house, Marcus." Amber shoved him aside. "Get out of the way, old woman," she shrieked, her voice cracking. She pushed past me, brushing my shoulder hard enough that I stumbled back. Marcus followed her, his eyes on the floor. They stood in my small living room, looking completely out of place like two ravenous wolves in a sheep pen. "How could you?" Amber screamed. She was shaking. "You humiliated me in front of everyone, in front of Davenport. My phone hasn't stopped ringing. They're calling an emergency board meeting on Monday. They're talking about my ethics. This is your fault. I am not the one." I said, my voice quiet but filling the room. "Who screamed beggar at her mother-in-law. You set me up. You knew he was there. You were planning it. I didn't plan for you to be cruel, dear. That was all you." Marcus finally spoke. He wouldn't look at me. He was staring at the worn spot on my carpet, the one Samuel always put his feet on. "Mom, we need money." I waited. The grandfather clock in the corner ticked, tick-tock. "Mom," he said again, his voice thick, "we need $100,000. It's the deposit for the house in Hillcrest. The deal, it closes on Monday. If we don't have the deposit, we lose it." I just stared at him. The audacity of it. After everything. After the plan to have me declared incompetent. After the public humiliation. After he stood by and let his wife call me trash. He was standing in my house demanding money. For the very house they were going to buy with my money. Amber saw the look on my face. "Just give it to us," she snapped. "It's the least you can do after what you did. You owe us." I looked at her. I looked at my son, and I let out a small, quiet laugh. "You're asking me for $100,000. Yes," Marcus said, finally looking at me, his eyes desperate. "Mom, please." I smiled, the same simple, harmless smile from the party. "But Marcus," I said, my voice as sweet as honey. "Why would you ask me?" I paused, letting the silence hang in the air. "I'm just the hired help. I'm just a beggar." Marcus's face went hard, the desperation replaced by something cold and ugly. "Don't play games with me, Mom. We don't have time for this." He stepped past me, yanked his briefcase onto my kitchen table, and snapped it open. He didn't pull out the papers. He threw them. They scattered across the table, covering the spot where Elijah's pie had been. "Apex Realty Appraisals," he said, tapping the top page. "Your little house, 1224 Willow Street. It appraised last Tuesday for $520,000. I just stared at him. Last Tuesday. That was the day I was at the center all day baking for the homeless shelter drive. Amber, seeing her opening, moved next to him, her voice dripping with condescending sweetness. "That's $500,000, Josephine. More than enough." "Enough for what?" I whispered. "We don't need your savings," Marcus said. He shoved another document toward me, a mortgage application. "We just need your signature. Right here, cosign. With this house as collateral. The bank has already pre-approved the loan. We can get the $100,000 by Monday." They had appraised my home, behind my back, while I was feeding strangers. "You had people walking through my house." "It was easy," Amber sneered. "We just told the appraiser you were forgetful, and that we were handling your estate planning. He didn't even blink." I looked at the mortgage application. I looked at the appraisal. I looked at my son, his face impatient, and I finally understood the real plan. "This is the backup plan, isn't it, Marcus?" He frowned. "What are you talking about? Just sign the paper. This is the plan for when the first one failed." I picked up the appraisal, my hand steady. "This is what you try when the party doesn't work out." The color drained from both of their faces. Marcus took a physical step back as if I'd hit him. Amber's jaw dropped. They were stunned. How do you... Marcus stammered. I smiled. The simple, harmless smile of the hired help. You were right, Marcus. I was confused. I was confused that my own son, the boy I raised, would stand by while his wife called me a beggar. I was confused that you would plan to get me drunk at a party, so I would sign... What was it, Amber conservatorship papers? Amber looked like she was going to choke. You searched how to declare a senior mentally incompetent on your work computer, Amber. Your work computer, the one my company owns. Amber's face went from pale to a deep, blotchy red. You spied on me. You tried to steal from me. My voice rose the ice in my veins, finally turning to fire. You plotted to have me locked away, to take my home, to steal my life, all to buy a house in Hillcrest. Mom, listen. Marcus held his hand out, his voice pleading. No! The word ripped out of me, a lifetime of love and betrayal packed into one sound. You do not speak in this house again. I walked to my front door. I pulled it open so hard it banged against the wall. You wanted me out of your sight, I said, my voice shaking with rage. You got your wish. Mom, please, we can talk about this. I pointed. Get out. You can't do this. We're your family, Amber shrieked. Get out of my house, I roared. And don't you ever come back. They stumbled back, shocked by my voice. Amber grabbed Marcus's arm, pulling him. They scrambled out the door. I slammed it shut behind them. I turned the deadbolt, and I slid to the floor, my whole body shaking. Finally, alone in my own home. I didn't cry. Not this time. The shaking subsided, replaced by a cold, hard clarity. They thought they had seen the angry old woman. They hadn't. They had just seen the mother. Now they were about to meet the CEO. I picked up my phone. I didn't call Marcus. I didn't call Tasha. I scrolled past both of their names to a number I hadn't dialed myself in over a year. It rang once. Mrs. Washington, this is an unexpected pleasure. His voice was crisp, professional. David Chen, the man who actually ran JW Capital for me. David, I said. My voice was different. The soft, grandmotherly tone was gone, replaced by the one I used to use when a supplier tried to double charge me. We have a situation. I need you to call an emergency in-person board meeting. Of course, for JW Capital. No, for Aura Marketing. Monday morning, 9 a.m. sharp, at their main conference room. There was a half-second pause. David was smart. He knew this was unusual. May I ask the nature of the meeting? We are discussing a personnel issue with a senior vice president named Amber Hayes. I believe she's currently on the shortlist for the new executive VP position. She is, David confirmed. Her numbers are good. Davenport has been championing her. Excellent, I said. Keep her on that list. Make sure she feels confident. I want her to be in a celebratory mood. I want her expecting a promotion. Understood. And the agenda? The agenda, I said, looking at the mortgage application still sitting on my kitchen table, is corporate ethics, governance, and asset misappropriation. That's a heavy-hitting agenda, Josephine. Is there anything I should prepare? Yes. I want you, our head of legal, and our head of HR there. I want a full security detail in the lobby, and I want you to have a termination letter drawn up for Amber Hayes. Effective immediately. Silence. David Chen was a man who handled 9-figure deals, and I had just stunned him into silence. Josephine, Amber Hayes is one of Davenport's top people. Firing her like this is a bomb. I am aware of that, David. This bomb is one I am dropping myself. It's worse than we thought. I paused. How could it possibly be worse, baby? They just tried to steal my house after plotting to have me declared senile. The conservatorship was just part of it, he said. That was how they planned to hide the theft. The real crime, she's already committed. I sat down. Show me. Elijah turned his laptop around. It wasn't an email this time. It was a corporate expense report. Amber's. I've been in her expense account for the last hour. She's been bleeding Aura Marketing dry. He pointed to a line item. $35,000. over the last 4 months, all on her corporate card. My eyes narrowed. For what? That's the best part, he said, his voice dripping with sarcasm. Look at the categorization. Client, entertainment, and travel. She expensed her trip to Paris, the one she and my father took 2 months ago. I remembered the pictures she'd posted, laughing in front of the Eiffel Tower. And this, he clicked another link, a receipt from a high-end boutique. That silver dress she was wearing last night, the one she looked down at your navy dress in $9,000. She expensed it, called it client-facing wardrobe upgrade. The hired help. The woman who called me the hired help was wearing a dress my company paid for. I didn't say anything. I just sipped my coffee. She's been stealing from you, Grandma, Elijah said, his voice shaking with rage. She's been using JW Capital's money to fund her entire lifestyle, all while planning to steal the rest of it. A slow, cold smile spread across my face. It probably looked terrifying. I didn't care. Oh, Elijah, I said. This isn't worse. This is excellent. He looked confused. Grandma, what do you mean? It means, baby, that she hasn't just conspired to commit a crime. She's already committed one. She hasn't just betrayed family, she's committed felony-level corporate fraud. I took another sip. This is no longer a family matter. This is a business matter, and I know how to handle business. I pulled my phone out. I dialed David Chen. David Josephine, change of plans for Monday. I'll need you to contact Mr. Davenport. Tell him the emergency board meeting is still on, but tell him the purpose has been updated. I looked at Elijah, who was watching me with awe. Tell Arthur that all candidates for the executive VP position will be required to give a 10-minute presentation on their strategy for fiscal responsibility. I will be presiding. And David, make sure Amber Hayes presents first. Amber Hayes sat in her white home office nursing a glass of wine, her head pounding. The adrenaline from the confrontation at the old woman's house had worn off, leaving behind a bitter, metallic taste of rage. She slammed the door on me, she muttered to the empty room. That ungrateful old hag. Marcus was in the den, probably drinking, moping about his family. And he was useless, weak, just like his mother. Amber knew it was all up to her now. The Hillcrest house was slipping away. That old fool would never sign the papers now, not willingly. She pulled her laptop closer, wincing. She'd have to do damage control. She opened her work email, her fingers already composing the apology to Arthur Davenport. Something about her mother-in-law having a sudden tragic cognitive episode. Yes, that was good. It would make her look compassionate and reinforce the exact narrative they needed for the conservatorship. She was in the middle of typing a sentence about sudden onset confusion when the new email landed in her inbox. Her blood went cold. It was from David Chen, the CEO of JW Capital, the big boss. The subject line made her heart stop. Urgent. Final VP candidate presentation and board meeting, Monday 9 a.m. Her hands shook as she clicked it. Dear Mrs. Hayes, due to a scheduling change, the final presentation for the executive VP position has been moved to tomorrow Monday at 9 a.m. in the main Aura conference room. Please be prepared to present your 10-minute strategy for fiscal responsibility. Note: this will be an emergency board meeting. The full executive board of JW Capital will be in attendance to finalize their decision. Regards, David Chen, CEO, JW Capital. Amber read it once, twice, the full executive board, JW Capital, attending her presentation. A slow, wide smile spread across her face. The headache vanished. Marcus, she screamed, her voice triumphant. Marcus, get in here, it worked. Marcus stumbled into the room, his eyes red and lost. What worked, Mom? Called the police. Forget that old woman. Amber laughed, a high, sharp sound. She held up her phone, showing him the email. It worked. The party Davenport. He was impressed. They're not just giving me the VP job. They're calling in the entire JW Capital board to watch me present. They're fast-tracking my promotion. This is it. But, Amber, after last night, you called her a... Who cares? Amber grabbed him by the shoulders, shaking him. "Don't you see Davenport didn't see a crazy old woman? He saw me. He saw a woman strong enough to handle a difficult family situation. Decisive. He liked that I didn't back down." She looked at the email again. Strategy for fiscal responsibility. "This is it," she whispered. "This is my coronation." She had no idea that JW Capital stood for Josephine Washington. She had no idea she was preparing for her own execution. She just knew that Monday morning she would finally get everything she deserved. Amber poured herself another glass of expensive wine, the good stuff, the kind she deserved. She was buzzing electric with a feeling of pure, unadulterated victory. The confrontation at the old woman's house felt like a distant, unpleasant dream. This email was reality. She hit Marcus's number on her phone. He picked up on the fourth ring, his voice dull and lifeless. "What? Change that tone, baby," Amber purred, swirling the wine in her glass. "You are talking to the next executive vice president of Aura Marketing." "What, Amber? What are you talking about?" "My mother." "Oh, forget your mother." She snapped her good mood, instantly souring. "Forget that senile old beggar. That's what I'm trying to tell you. We don't need her. We don't need her house. We don't need her signature. We don't need her pity charity money." I don't understand." "Of course you don't," she said, sighing. She walked to her window, looking out over the suburban street. It was so small, but not for long. "While you were moping, I was winning. That little scene I caused last night, Davenport loved it. He saw a shark, Marcus, not a minnow. He saw someone who isn't afraid to take charge." She read him the email, the full board. JW Capital. Her presentation. "They're not just giving me the job, Marcus," she said, her voice dropping to a low, triumphant purr. "They're anointing me. They're flying in the entire board from JW to watch me present. This isn't just a promotion. This is the big leagues." "Amber, this feels fast. Are you sure after what?" "After your mother humiliated me, this is them making it right. They're showing me that I'm valued, that I am the future." She took a long sip of wine. "And that old woman, she'll be begging us for scraps when I'm running this city. She'll regret the day she didn't just sign the papers." She laughed. "God, she really thought she had us, slamming the door in my face. It was pathetic. Now I'm going to buy that house in Hillcrest without her help. I'm going to be Arthur Davenport's neighbor, and I'm going to send her a Christmas card from my new address." "Amber, maybe we should just lay low." "You lay low, Marcus. I'm ascending. Now I have work to do. I have to prepare the presentation of my life." She hung up on him, the frustration of his weakness fading as she looked at the email again. Strategy for fiscal responsibility. "Oh, that's easy," she said to herself. She opened a new file. She would dazzle them. She would talk about cutting redundant assets, optimizing revenue streams, and leveraging new markets. She would be brilliant. She would be untouchable. She spent the entire weekend working, fueled by coffee and triumph. Every word was perfect. Every slide was polished. This wasn't just a presentation. It was her future. And it was all happening because she was smarter, stronger, and better than that simple old woman who thought a slammed door was the end of the story. Monday morning, 9 a.m. The main conference room at Aura Marketing was blinding. Sunlight streamed through the floor-to-ceiling glass walls, gleaming off the long, polished mahogany table. The air was thick with the smell of expensive coffee and ambition. Every senior manager was there, along with the entire Aura executive team. They were all in their sharpest suits, whispering among themselves, looking toward the head of the table where three unfamiliar faces sat. David Chen, CEO of JW Capital, their head of legal, their head of HR, Amber Hayes, made her entrance at precisely 9:01 a.m. She didn't just walk in, she glided. She wore a crisp white power suit with sharp shoulders, her hair pulled back in a severe, elegant bun. She carried a leather portfolio. Her smile was bright, confident, and practiced. She was no longer the hysterical woman screaming at an old lady. She was the executive vice president. She saw the JW Capital board members, and her smile widened. This was it. They were all here. For her. She felt a quick, smug flash of pity for Marcus. He was probably at home moping. And that old woman, well, she was probably baking her pathetic little pies. Amber would send her a postcard from Hillcrest. Arthur Davenport stood up. He looked tired. The weekend had clearly been stressful for him, but he smiled warmly at Amber. "Good morning, everyone. Thank you for coming." He gestured to the men at the head of the table. "As you know, we've been in a long search for our new executive VP, and today the board of JW Capital has joined us for the final presentation from our top candidate." He smiled directly at Amber. "Amber Hayes has been a remarkable asset to this company. She is decisive-driven and has a clear vision for the future." He paused, and a flicker of the party crossed his face. "And as some of us saw this weekend, she is fiercely protective of this company's reputation." Amber beamed. He had been impressed. "Her topic today," Davenport continued, "is a strategy for fiscal responsibility. A critical subject as we move into the next quarter. Amber, the floor is yours." Amber stood. She gave a gracious, humble nod to Davenport. She smiled at David Chen. She felt every eye on her. This was her moment. This was the pinnacle. She walked to the podium, her heels clicking with sharp authority on the floor. She plugged her laptop in. The presentation she had worked on all weekend, the one that would secure her $8 million future, lit up the massive screen behind her. "Thank you, Arthur," she said, her voice smooth and strong. "And thank you to the board of JW Capital for this incredible opportunity." She was about to begin her first slide when a new voice cut through the room. "Actually, Mrs. Hayes, I will be presiding over this meeting." The conference room doors at the far end opened, and in walked Josephine Washington. Amber froze. Her perfectly prepared opening slide about fiscal responsibility hung on the screen behind her, suddenly looking ridiculous. She knew that voice. She turned, her heart hammering against her ribs. Every head in the room swiveled toward the back. The main conference room doors were still open, and walking through them was Josephine Washington. She was not the hired help. She was not the beggar. She was wearing a tailored charcoal gray suit that fit her perfectly. Her hair was pulled back in an elegant twist. On her lapel was a simple platinum pin, the JW Capital logo. She walked with a quiet authority that silenced the room. Behind her walked David Chen, the CEO of JW Capital. Behind him walked two people in severe black suits, the JW Legal Counsel. And behind them walked Elijah. Elijah wasn't wearing his university hoodie. He was in a crisp suit, carrying a slim laptop. He met Amber's eyes across the room, and he didn't smile. Amber stared, her mind unable to connect the images. The old woman, the JW logo, the CEO, her nephew. It didn't make sense. "Mom," she whispered, her voice cracking. "What? What are you doing here, Elijah?" Arthur Davenport, seeing the obvious family tension, stepped forward. He looked confused. "Josephine, I'm afraid this is a private board meeting." David Chen stepped past Josephine. He placed his own briefcase at the head of the table. "Thank you, Arthur," David said, his voice cutting through the silent room. "But as this is an emergency meeting of the JW Capital Board, I will be handling the proceedings from here." Amber looked completely lost. "Mr. Chen, I don't understand. I was just about to present my strategy." "Your strategy," David Chen said, his face like stone, "is the reason we are all here, Mrs. Hayes." He turned, gesturing respectfully toward Josephine, who had taken a seat at the head of the long table, the seat he had just vacated. "Mr. Davenport," David said, addressing Arthur directly, "you and this entire office have been operating under a misunderstanding. You work for Aura Marketing. Aura Marketing is owned by JW Capital, and JW Capital is owned by her." He looked at Josephine. "Ladies and gentlemen," David Chen announced to the stunned room, "allow me to introduce the chairwoman of the board, the founder and the sole owner of JW Capital, Mrs. Josephine Washington." The room was so quiet, I could have heard a pin drop on the thick carpet. Every eye was locked on David Chen, and then he turned his gaze to the open conference room doors. Mr. Davenport, David said, his voice ringing with formal authority, you and this entire office have been operating under a misunderstanding. You work for Aura Marketing. Aura Marketing is owned by JW Capital, and JW Capital is owned by her. He gestured respectfully toward the doorway. Ladies and gentlemen, David Chen announced, allow me to introduce the chairwoman of the board, the founder and the sole owner of JW Capital, Mrs. Josephine, Washington. And then I walked in. I was not the hired help in the sensible navy dress. I was not the beggar in the worn red coat. I was wearing a wine-red Chanel suit, a simple, impeccably tailored suit that probably cost more than Amber's yearly salary. My hair was swept up, and the simple pearl earrings Samuel had given me were my only jewelry. I didn't need any. My presence was enough. I walked past the stunned managers, my heels clicking quietly on the floor. Elijah walked behind me, his face impassive, his laptop held at his side like a thin digital sword. I saw Arthur Davenport's face. He had turned to stone. His mouth was slightly open as he stared at me. I could see the memory playing across his features. The party. His confusion. Amber's high, sharp voice. She's confused. A beggar. He was connecting the dots, and the final picture was one of absolute professional horror. He wasn't just my employee. He was the man who had championed the woman who tried to destroy me. But my eyes were on Amber. Amber had not moved. She was frozen at the podium, her triumphant presentation about fiscal responsibility still glowing on the screen behind her. All the blood had drained from her face. Her skin was the color of old parchment. Her bright, confident smile was gone, replaced by a slack-jawed, vacant stare of pure, uncomprehending terror. The woman she had screamed at, the woman she had plotted against, the sentimental old fool she was going to have locked away, was standing at the head of the table. She swayed. She physically stumbled back a step, gripping the podium to hold herself up. I walked past her, not even giving her a glance, and took my seat at the head of the table, the one David Chen had been keeping warm for me. I placed my hands on the table. I looked at Amber, who was still standing still, shaking her entire $8 million future collapsing in on her in the space of a single heartbeat. She opened her mouth. A small, strange choking sound came out. Mom. It was the weakest sound I had ever heard her make. It was the sound of a predator who had just realized it was prey. I sat down. The chair at the head of the table was no more comfortable than my old wooden one in the kitchen, but it felt different. It felt like a throne. The silence in the room was absolute. It was so quiet. I could hear the faint sound of Amber's breathing, which had become quick and shallow. She was still standing at the podium, frozen, her triumphant presentation glowing on the screen behind her. I folded my hands on the polished mahogany. I looked down the long table past the stunned faces of the managers, past David Chen, past Arthur Davenport, who looked like he wanted to crawl under the table. Finally, I let my gaze rest on Amber. "Good morning," I said. My voice was quiet, but it filled the room. "Mrs. Hayes," I continued, "I believe you and I have met at a party. Was it Friday night?" Amber made a small sound like a strangled gasp. She nodded a tiny, jerky movement. "Yes," I said, as if remembering. "I believe you were there. You were wearing a rather expensive dress." I turned my head slightly to David Chen. "A dress, I'm told, that was charged to the company, under wardrobe upgrade, a very creative bit of accounting." David Chen's face was impassive. "We are looking into it, Madam Chairwoman." Amber's knees buckled. She gripped the podium with both hands, her knuckles white. I turned my full attention back to her. "But we are not here to discuss fashion, are we? We are here to discuss your presentation." I gestured to the screen behind her. "A strategy for fiscal responsibility. Please, Mrs. Hayes," I said, my voice polite, almost gentle. "Begin whenever you're ready. I am so looking forward to hearing your insights on corporate integrity." Amber opened her mouth. Nothing came out. She stared at me, her eyes wide with pure animal terror. The woman who had screamed beggar at me, the woman who had plotted to have me declared incompetent and locked away the woman who had planned to steal my home and my company, was mute. She looked at her laptop. She looked at the screen. She looked at Arthur Davenport, but he was staring at his hands, his face ashen. She looked at David Chen, who was watching her with cold, clinical disinterest. Is there a problem, Mrs. Hayes?" I asked, feigning concern. "You seem unwell. Perhaps you're confused." That word hit her like a physical slap. She shook her head, a violent, desperate motion. I, she stammered. "The floor is yours," I said, leaning back in my chair. "Please, enlighten us." She couldn't. She was completely broken. Her grand, triumphant morning, her coronation, had turned into a nightmare. And the sentimental old fool she had dismissed was sitting at the head of the table, holding the executioner's axe. Amber stood there trembling, her mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. She looked at her laptop, then at the board, then at me. She was utterly, completely broken. I let the silence stretch for one more beat. 2, 3. Then I sighed. "Well, it seems Mrs. Hayes is at a loss for words." I turned to my grandson. "Elijah, perhaps you should assist her." "Yes, Madam Chairwoman," Elijah said. He stood, his movements calm and precise. He walked to the head of the table and connected his own slim laptop to the main display. Amber's triumphant presentation slide vanished. It was replaced by something else, an expense report. Amber Hayes, Corporate Amex, last 90 days. "Mrs. Hayes was invited to present on fiscal responsibility," I said to the silent room. "It seems she has extensive experience with the topic. Elijah, please proceed." Elijah's voice was clear and cold, echoing in the dead quiet room. "We've conducted a preliminary audit of Mrs. Hayes's corporate expenditures." He used a laser pointer. The red dot landed on the screen. "Total corporate card expenses in the last 4 months, $35,480, all filed under Client Entertainment and Wardrobe." He clicked. A new screen appeared, a breakdown of the charges. "These expenses include," Elijah set his voice level, "a 5-night stay at the Hotel George V in Paris, 2 round-trip business-class tickets to the same city, multiple dinners at Michelin-starred restaurants, and—" He clicked again. A receipt from a high-end boutique appeared on the massive screen. "This, a $9,000 dress from Chanel, purchased 2 weeks ago." Elijah turned his head just slightly to look at Amber. His voice was devastatingly polite. "I believe," he said, "it's the same dress you were wearing when you publicly humiliated the chairwoman of this company at a private party. A party you were only attending," he added, "to impress your boss, Mr. Davenport, a man who I must remind you is an employee of this board." Arthur Davenport sank lower in his chair, his face ashen. Amber made a small choking sound. She was staring at the receipt, her receipt blown up 10 feet tall for the entire board to see. "So, Mrs. Hayes," I said, my voice soft, "this is your strategy for fiscal responsibility, using company funds, my company's funds, to buy a dress you could wear while you called me a beggar." She didn't answer. She couldn't. "Elijah," I said. "Continue. I believe there's more." "But corporate fraud, it seems, was only part of the plan," I said, my voice cutting through the stunned silence. "Mrs. Hayes was not just stealing from the company. She was conspiring to steal from me personally." Amber, who had been leaning on the podium, slid into her chair, her face in her hands. She was done. Elijah clicked to the next slide. The screen was filled with a high-resolution scan of a familiar document. "Apex Realty Appraisals. Property assessment for 1224 Willow Street. My home." "Yesterday morning," Elijah's cold, clear voice narrated, "Mrs. Hayes and her husband, Marcus Washington, confronted the chairwoman at her home. They brought this appraisal with them, an appraisal they had commissioned without the owner's knowledge." Arthur Davenport winced. David Chen looked at his legal counsel, who was scribbling notes furiously. "They presented this," Elijah continued, along with mortgage documents. Their plan was to force the chairwoman to co-sign a loan for $100,000, using her own home as collateral so they could purchase a multi-million-dollar property in Hillcrest. One of the board members started. This is a family dispute.
Is it? I asked, my voice soft. I looked at Amber. Mrs. Hayes, what was your plan when I refused to sign? Amber didn't look up. That's all right, I said. Elijah, show them the rest. Elijah clicked again. The document vanished, replaced by an audio file. I was present in the home during this confrontation, Elijah said. My grandmother was understandably concerned for her safety. She asked me to document the meeting. A lie, but a beautiful one. He had planted a recorder on my kitchen counter when he'd come over to check on me that morning. He knew they were coming. His voice filled the room, Marcus's voice. Mom, we need $100,000. The deal, it closes on Monday. The board listened horrified as the audio played. They heard Amber's voice. Just give it to us. It's the least you can do after what you did. You owe us, they heard Marcus. We just need your signature, right here, co-sign, with this house as collateral. They heard Amber's sneer. We just told the appraiser you were forgetful and that we were handling your estate planning. And then they heard my voice, cold and final. You searched how to declare a senior mentally incompetent on your work computer, Amber, the one my company owns. The audio stopped. Elijah turned to the board. This was not a family dispute. This was the final stage of a conspiracy to defraud the founder of this company. When their initial plan to have her declared incompetent failed, they resorted to intimidation and coercion. He looked at Amber, who was sobbing into her hands, and Elijah said, his voice dropping, "It gets worse." The audio recording of my son's desperate voice echoed in the silent room. Mom, we need $100,000. Amber Hayes didn't just look defeated. She looked erased. She stared at the blank presentation screen, her entire reality, her entire future having just been publicly dismantled piece by the very people she thought she was fooling. She slid out of her chair. It wasn't a dramatic faint. It was a slow, boneless collapse. She crumpled onto the expensive carpet, a heap of white Chanel, and exposed pathetic ambition. No one in the room moved to help her. Not her colleagues, not the board members, and certainly not Arthur Davenport, who looked like he had just swallowed poison. He was staring at me, his face a mask of pure professional horror. I stood up. I didn't need to raise my voice. I spoke to Arthur, but my words were for everyone in that room. Mr. Davenport, I said. My voice was cold, clear, and final. JW Capital, my company. We do not tolerate fraud, we do not tolerate theft, and we do not tolerate executives who use their position to plot against this board or their families. I turned my gaze to the woman on the floor. Mrs. Amber Hayes is terminated, effective immediately, for cause. The word terminated seemed to jolt her back to life. She scrambled to her knees, her white suit now smudged with dust from the floor. No! She shrieked, her voice raw and ugly. You can't do this. I haven't done anything wrong. You set me up. Her wild, desperate eyes scanned the room. They bypassed Arthur. They bypassed David. They landed on the one person who had been silent this whole time. Marcus, she screamed. Marcus, say something. Don't let her do this to me. Tell them it was your idea. Tell them you hate her. Marcus, do something. I looked at my son. He was as white as the walls, frozen in his chair, staring at the wife who had just implicated him in front of the entire board. He didn't move. He didn't speak. He was completely, utterly broken. I turned to David Chen. David? Security. David nodded once and pressed a button on the conference room phone. Security to the main boardroom. Now. The two uniformed guards were there in less than 30 seconds. Mrs. Hayes, I said, my voice quiet again. This meeting is over. These gentlemen will escort you from the building. No! She screamed, scrambling to her feet as they approached. You can't! This is my office, my promotion.
The guards took her firmly by the arms. She was not the poised executive anymore. She was a cornered animal. She fought, twisting, kicking, her voice echoing. "Get your hands off me! You can't do this!" She twisted her head, her face purple with rage, her eyes locked on me. "You!" she screamed as they dragged her toward the door. "You old witch! You planned this! You tricked me! You're a monster! A devil!" I stood at the head of the table, calm, still. I let her finish screaming. As the guards pulled her through the doorway, I said one last thing. My voice was not loud, but it cut through her hysteria and silenced the entire hallway. "No, Amber." She stopped struggling just for a second to hear me. "I didn't trick you," I said. "You tricked yourself. You just forgot one simple thing." I let the pause hang in the air. "You thought you were dealing with a beggar." The heavy glass doors of the conference room closed, cutting off Amber's final hysterical shriek. Silence. The room was frozen. The senior manager stared at me at the empty chair Amber had fallen out of at the presentation screen, which still showed the incriminating audio file. Marcus was still by the wall, pale gray and trembling. He hadn't moved. He was just a statue of a man who had lost everything. I let the silence sit for a moment longer. I let them all absorb what they had just witnessed. Then I turned my gaze to Arthur Davenport. He flinched, actually flinched. "Arthur," I said. My voice was no longer angry. It was calm, surgical. "We need to discuss your judgment in personnel matters." He swallowed, his face ashen. "Josephine, Madam Chairwoman, I had no idea. I am appalled. I cannot—" "You championed her," I said, cutting him off. "You told me yourself she was decisive and driven. You were impressed by her. You were so impressed you were willing to overlook your own instincts at that party. You were going to promote the very woman who was conspiring to defraud the founder of this company. Your judgment is compromised." He looked like I had physically struck him. "Josephine, please." I let him hang there. "We will discuss your future later, in private." I turned to David Chen. "David, please have HR process Mrs. Hayes' termination." "Wait." My voice stopped him. I looked at the head of my legal team. "What are our options regarding the $35,000? We can press criminal charges for fraud and embezzlement, Madam Chairwoman. The evidence is irrefutable. She would almost certainly serve time." I nodded, pretending to consider it. Then I looked at Marcus. He was watching me, his eyes hollow. "No," I said, my voice thoughtful. "Prison is messy. And my son's wife, well, family is family, isn't it?" I looked at David. "I have a better idea. Tell HR the termination stands, but I understand our corporate cafeteria is short-staffed. We have a new opening for a dishwasher, effective tomorrow morning, 6 a.m., minimum wage." The board stared at me. "Madam Chairwoman," David asked, confused. "Offer her the position," I said. "It's that, or I press charges for felony fraud. Her choice. I'm told she's very good at cleaning up messes." Amber Hayes, the executive VP candidate, in the cafeteria kitchen, washing plates. Then I turned to my son. "Marcus." He looked up, his face a mask of shame. "You are not fired." A tiny spark of hope flickered in his eyes. I immediately extinguished it. "You will, however," I said, "be demoted, effective immediately. You will be reporting directly to Elijah, as his administrative assistant." Elijah's face remained perfectly, beautifully impassive. "You will be paid minimum wage," I continued, "and 100% of your salary will be garnished until you have paid back personally every single cent of the $35,000 your wife stole from my company. Are we clear?" He couldn't speak. He just nodded, his body finally collapsing into a chair. I stood up. I looked at the shocked, silent board. "This meeting is adjourned." 3 months later, I was sitting at the best table at Le Chandelier, the fanciest restaurant in the city. The city lights sparkled below us. Elijah sat across from me, looking sharp in a new suit. He was JW Capital's new director of oversight. Arthur Davenport, the restaurant's new manager, approached our table, his face respectful and nervous. "Is everything to your liking, Madam Chairwoman?" "It's perfect, Arthur." I said, smiling warmly. My compliments to the kitchen. As he walked away, I looked past him through the small diamond-shaped window in the kitchen door. And I saw her, Amber. Her hair was hidden under a net, her face slick with sweat. She was wearing a gray uniform and was scrubbing a massive scorched pot. She looked up just for a second, and our eyes met. I didn't smile. I just took a sip of my wine. My daughter-in-law wanted me to act my age. She just didn't realize that at 70, my age meant I was the one in charge. She wanted me to disappear from her party. Now she gets to wash the dishes for mine. So I'd love to hear what you think. Was giving her a job too merciful, or should I have pressed charges and let her go to prison? Let me know in the comments. The most dangerous mistake anyone can make is to confuse kindness with weakness and to underestimate those you should respect. In this story, Amber and Marcus looked at Josephine and saw only what they wanted to see: a confused, simple old woman in a floral apron. They called her a beggar because she was humble, failing to realize that her silence was not weakness, but observation. They plotted to steal from her, believing she was too old and naive to fight back. They forgot that a lifetime of experience forges steel. Josephine wasn't just a grandmother baking pies. She was Mama Jo, the founder and chairwoman of the entire JW Capital Empire. She proved that true power doesn't need to be loud or wear an expensive suit. It just needs to be precise. While they were busy plotting to get her signature, she was busy orchestrating their downfall. The ultimate lesson is that wisdom is quiet, and you should never ever mistake a quiet lion for a harmless lamb.
Shamdamji.
Have you ever been underestimated by someone who should have known better? Share your story in the comments below and subscribe for more tales of justice.